Hello everybody, welcome to Hellish Quart USFC 191. Once more, we are getting closer and closer to the milestone that is USFC 200, which is exciting. Our first fight is going to be Fenrir against Polar Grid. And actually, we have the title fight right after that, that being next, the current USFC champion against Captain Adler, because Captain Adler in particular needed an early fight. So we were able to provide that for him. So in the interest of not wasting time, we will get straight into it. It's a great lineup today, actually. The same lineup pretty much that we see in a lot of tournaments lately. A lot of the same names. The only person we're missing right now is Venator. He's typically not available at this time, so that's not surprising, although I would love to see him show up at another USFC if he is ever available. Boot up the game while we wait for the guys to join. I'll double check that the settings are where they should be as well. Just because stuff is often changed around. Yeah, let's make sure we're on more physics and more animation. Unfortunately, would wreck Gideon, so we're gonna leave that on more physics, and we're gonna have dynamic muscles off, of course. It switches on automatically when you switch it, but I switched it off, as you can see there on stream. So those are the settings we're playing on, just trying to be transparent about that and make sure we have the correct settings. I've been testing stuff out, so been switching quite a bit. Polar Grid's food just arrived. Yeah, take your time, it's fine. I don't think Fenrir is in a massive rush per se, but he does need the first bite, so. As a good rule of thumb, by the way, for those who are a bit newer, fights tend to take roughly 20 minutes. They can be obviously faster, but that's typically the sort of time that you're looking at for a USFC fight. So, yes, you're on the left, Fenrir, and Polar Grid will be on the right. Yeah, good question. The fight card tells you what side you're on, as you can see there. And I make sure you have keyboard as well. Polar Grid, I believe, yes, also needs keyboard, so I'll give him keyboard when he joins. Welcome extremely again, the chat. Regular at this point to the USFC chat. Glad to have you here. The game capture is working as well, it looks like, which is good. Don't have to fiddle with that. I'll get the name sorted out as well while we're here. Let's go. Okay, go ahead and join that link I provided. And you should have keyboard as well. Settings are in order. I have a suspicion these settings were changed, and sure enough they were, so I gotta change them back again. The switching sides thing, like I said, it can be quite useful in some situations, but in this case, not at all. So it's best to just disable the button. It's very jarring if somebody accidentally inputs that. Fenrir take the left, Polar Grid take the right. I'm actually not sure which character Polar Grid is going to pick. Fenrir, it seems like he will probably pick Gideon. So in his case, it's especially a good thing that we switched it to more physics because, believe it or not, Gideon actually does not have much of a guard in the more animations mode for some reason. There's a bug with that we discovered. It'll probably be a while until Kupel actually fixes that, but it is what it is. Me personally, I'm happy to play. Oh, we're at 10 flags for some reason. I think it's because I was doing the whatchamacallit, the fell event. So we'll play to 7. I overlooked that in when I was switching the settings around to where they should be. Yeah, just play to 7 and I can fix that very easily. Won't take that long. Yeah, for those who are unfamiliar, 7 flags, best of 5. And a bit of a crisscross of cuts there by Polar Grid trying to impose his timing on his opponent, but as a result we get a double. Fenrir actually does play a pretty good bar as well, so not super surprising to see that. I did expect Gideon, but I think Bar Bash is also a good choice. For this matchup, it can go either way. It's all down to the players for the most part. Glad to see Yazik getting used more, Samuel getting used more, Tarna. These sorts of characters that have a lot of untapped potential, but are undeniably also part of the meta at this point. A lot of the best players use them. YY cuts there, does try to get the blade beat, but Yazik recovers pretty quickly, so he is able to get out of that. The snap cut is attempted there, but Polar Grid was able to hit first. And stab right to the neck as Polar Grid takes a pretty decisive advantage here. In these flags, obviously the flag is flag difference isn't that great, but it feels like he's coming back to life and dominating the flags, although that has changed now as Fenrir gets a flag back. It still feels like Polar Grid has control now, though, as he only needs to score 1 more. Nice void there, and he baits his opponent in there. One moment, guys, we have just passed 7 flags, so I'm going to go switch that really quick. So Polar Grid won that first game. And we'll switch sides. Okay, switch sides. Yeah, as I said, it's best of 5, 7 flags, so make sure you switch sides. No, he got 7 flags. Best of 5 means you win in 3 rounds. Yeah, I'm in the commentator booth now. Thanks for reminding me about that. Yeah, if you guys are confused, the rules are always listed in the announcement. You can just go read them there. Yeah, very easy to find. I always post them. And Polar Grid, yeah, he's just come back to life. It looked like he was surrendering a lot of initiative at first. Maybe he was sort of feeling his opponent out and it wasn't going so well, but now he's imposing his timing better on his opponent, for the most part without making any errors, so he has a... Like, even though the flag count, especially the last one, wasn't so great of a difference. It still felt like he was taking control of the fight. And so I had a feeling he was going to win, even if Fenrir scored some flags back, which is what happened. But now we're seeing a much clearer advantage, I would say. So the flags are now better reflecting sort of the flow of the fight, I would say. And that's not for lack of trying in Fenrir's part. That was a nice sidestep. But that stab, yeah, you have to be ready to long guard it or blade beat it. Fenrir still stays in the fight, though. He doesn't give up after taking a skid from that thrust. It wasn't a perfect hit, so it didn't kill. And there we go. Actually, Fenrir is starting to come back to life himself now, which I always like to see. Some twists and turns in this fight. It's actually not super clear if he will lose this round now, as he goes for a YY at an awkward time for Polar Grid, and Polar Grid is not ready to block it. Nice kick. Can he follow it up? He tries to, but the YY is a little bit slow after the kick. And although they do trade, Polar Grid is able to land a nice hit to the head, whereas it looks like Fenrir hit the shoulder. So it actually does make sense that he lost that. Just a bit imprecise with the follow-up, which happens to the best of us in those hectic situations. They can go either way. But a great effort all the same. He nearly brought it back, so kudos to Fenrir for staying in the fight. Sticking with Bar, we're going to see a switch to Samuel. Perhaps Polar Grid just wants to switch it up. He feels like his opponent's starting to figure him out, so he wants to completely change his style. Samuel, like Yazlik, has a great guard and a good recovery back to guard. But I would say Samuel likes to play the range, sort of sniping, solid game, whereas Yazlik likes to combo and move more dynamically. So a bit of a different approach, despite on the surface having some similar attributes. And, you know, even visually, like Samuel is more linear than Yazlik is, I would say. Certainly when Yazlik goes to left foot forward, he's a lot more squared up. Yeah, great usage of the sidestep here and the chop. The upcut is able to punish the back Y, although the back Y still landed. So it is a double. And actually Fenrir is ahead this time, which we've seen before. It's up to Fenrir to somehow convert this into an advantage, though. Whether that'll be possible or not, we'll see. Double. Ooh. Tried the YY there. Samuel's actually pretty good at blocking that combo, so it didn't land. It sometimes does break through Samuel's guard, but Samuel, for some reason, just does a better job. I think his guard is just overall more solid than a lot of characters, so probably the most solid in the game in a lot of respects, save for Denise, of course. So it is pretty hard to hit him sometimes for Barbash, but Barbash can exert more pressure up close, and so I like that Fenrir is trying to do that. Samuel wants to stop him in his tracks before he can do that with a nice counter cut, a single tempo, or a parry riposte. But if Barbash can get close and sort of leverage his powerful moves, he can come out on top. Now the A cut there with the intention to single tempo, but obviously the risk of single tempoing is that your opponent can hit you at the same time as well. So in trying to impose your attack on the opponent to both defend yourself and kill him, you're essentially potentially also giving your opponent the chance to hit you in that same moment. So it's not to say it's wrong to try doing that. If you pull it off, it's a fantastic tactic and a more advanced tactic, but there's a reason why it's considered a bit more advanced than the basics. It can backfire very easily. Even pro players often have it backfire all the time. It's just the nature of the chaos of fencing. Nice back X there by Polar Grid. Trying to catch him out by hitting the hand before he can get in, which is smart. But nice snap cut. Not able to follow it up this time, though, as his opponent recovers, and it's a double. Nice feints there by Fenrir. Love to see that. Feinting with Barabash is very important. Just gotta be careful not to invite your opponent in too much, as your opponent might try to call you out if they notice you're feinting a lot. Nice upcut with the false edge there, hitting the hand. Not quite able to get a kill out of that, but it's still some chip damage. Some chip damage as well for Fenrir. And goes for a thrust, but that snap cut is instantly able to hit the hand before the lunge is completed. Nicely done by Fenrir. A very precise counter. Some side steps by Fenrir and goes for a snap cut, but he hit the left arm, and obviously he got hit in the dome in turn, so no surprise that Samuel won that exchange. The left arm is one of the worst targets you can hit in this game. You can obviously kill with there just fine, but it's not the sword arm and it's not the head, so you're much more likely to survive if you're hit there versus the sword arm or the head, or sometimes even the body is actually a worse place to be hit. Polar Grid does win it in the end. The Thunder Punch attempt was immediately countered, but I do applaud Fenrir for giving the Thunder Punch a try. It's a very risky move, but if it works, it can definitely pay dividends. Unfortunately, it did not here. That A cut that Polar Grid is known for throwing worked really well. Now we have next against Captain Adler. This is, like I said earlier, the title fight. I'm going to assume next wants the left side, but I will double check. As the champion next gets to choose, that's actually not my choice in this case. Also, next is in the chat on YouTube, as is Pico. Welcome to both of you. Works for you, nice. I'll put you on the left in that case. Okay. Both fighters are joining. And both are gamepad, so we shouldn't have to use keyboard or anything like that, which is obviously not a big deal. But it is easier this way. Okay, so a reminder, this is the title fight, so make sure that you guys touch tips before we fight. We're doing it earlier because Captain Adler has to go, presumably very soon after, so we're not going to keep him any longer than we need to. Let me just double check the names while we're here too. There we go, we're good. Alright, touch tips. We got Tarnowski against Isabella. Okay, there's some aggression already as they touch tips. There we go. Okay. On the left, we have next. Here's the current USFC champion who defeated yours truly last USFC. Terrifying Isabella that I simply could not bypass with any of my attacks, and he did a great job countering me. But on the right, we have a really fierce attacker in Captain Adler using Tarnowski. Maybe Tarnowski will be able to break this iron wall defense. Captain Adler looking to take the title belt from next. Fight clean, fight dirty. You guys can begin. Anytime. There we go. There's a little hesitation there. Maybe some honor among combatants as they continue touching tips. There's a bit of a blade beat there, or a hand beat, I suppose you could say, as the hand is struck right there, and the thrust is beat down. Upcut there, actually catches the longsword and gets a hit at the same time. Nice by Captain Adler. Very Meyer-esque. This is the type of thing Meyer loves to do. As well as these big sort of movements. And nice again, Captain Adler winning the trade. So next tries to play by the book. I've talked about it in Venator's tournament. He plays a very solid Isabella. But Captain Adler, on the other hand, plays a character who's really tricky despite being powerful. And so we might see a lot of surprises here. Not to say Next cannot win this, but I feel like he'll have to adjust to Captain Adler's timing before he sees significant success. But it is a fight so far. Nice movement by Captain Adler. Unfortunately, the windup is too slow, though, for this follow-up. So he is hit in the middle of that attack. Right to the head. Nice blade beat, but not able to quite follow it up. That is the danger of blade beats. If you spend too much time targeting the opponent's blade, then you're not really presenting much of a threat. And of course, it's easy for me to say sitting here. I'm sure Captain Adler was planning to do more than just hit the blade, but oftentimes that is the result if your opponent's intelligently defending themselves, as they will back away if you blade beat, and then suddenly the blade beat didn't really achieve much. When you blade beat, the ideal situation is to quickly do so and then land a hit immediately after. Nice stabs by Captain Adler, showing us that Tarnowski actually has a pretty good thrusting game as well. It's one-dimensional in nature, so I wouldn't consider it one of the best, but it is good for what it is. But the counter to it is pretty straightforward. And Next shows us right there, you can just blade beat it if you want. Long guard is also an option. Or just positioning yourself better to meet the thrust. Yeah, Captain Adler's looking for that blade beat. But it's like trying to check the king in chess. If you're doing that but you have no follow-up, then you're sort of wasting time. And your opponent is easily able to adjust. Despite the fact that you've essentially stunned them. But still a great effort by Captain Adler. We might see a character switch, or we might still try to use Tarnowski. Let's see. Connor, this time Connor can be tricky for Isabella. But we've seen before, a creative Isabella can totally deal with this matchup as well. In fact, I believe Next was able to win this matchup previously, so he might have a good game plan for this matchup, despite the fact that Connor can overcome Isabella pretty well. The problem Connor has is he's a bit gimmicky, so if his gimmick fails for some reason, there Next had an opportunity to follow that up, but didn't take it. Probably didn't expect it. Which happens, you get a blade beat or something that you don't expect, and you're not already prepared to swing. And that's a skill you develop over time, just sort of sensing blood when your opponent is not able to respond. Nice stab, actually. Stabs are risky against the shield, but I think Captain Adler went with low guard or something, so it actually hit the arm. You can land thrusts on his auto guard too, if you time them right at the correct spacing and positioning, but it's very likely that they'll be blade beaten or they'll hit the shield and be deflected, so you have to be careful. Dashing in to the shield side is a ballsy move, but it actually pays off as he throws a cut right after when Captain Adler wasn't expecting it. He wasn't prepared to deal with a sudden attack like that. So it actually was a good move in the end, even though in most situations it probably would be rather careless. And yeah, I think Next did deserve the kill there. He got a blade beat and then a stun after the hit, so I'm glad he was able to follow that up. Nice, he caught the longsword there, but Captain Adler, for most of this fight, appears to be more or less behind the whole time. Next is doing a great job of getting in his face and imposing his tempo. That shield, unfortunately, not proving super valuable for Captain Adler, although he does get a nice leg hit here. Maybe he'll be able to replicate that. He does. Nice thing about Connor is that he does raise his shield to block when he does that, so you might be able to single tempo your opponent. But I doubt one move will be enough on its own. This time, he's able to square up, but a nice thrust by Captain Adler. He's still determined to win this one. He's going to go down swinging if he does go down, which I appreciate. Trying to move around, find an opening. The leg cut there, but that opens him up there to that thrust counter. Nicely done by Nex. Nex needs one more to maintain his streak and hold on to that champion title. Will Captain Adler make another switch? Or will he stick with Connor? I won't influence his decision. That's up to him. He can main multiple characters, of course, so it's totally up to him how he wants to approach this. Goes back to Tarna, which I think is fair. Tarna went a lot better, so we'll see what he can do this time. Captain Adler's behind, so maybe if he can cause a sufficient amount of chaos, he can take an advantage back. Does go for a thrust there, but it is slightly deflected, and he got hit twice there, so no surprise, he did win the trade there. Next, immediately hitting the head as Captain Adler swung out of measure. So far, the connection, by the way, for the guy seems really good. We haven't really had any issues, to my knowledge, with that, so that's good. There was a moment where I was kind of cursed with that. That's a nasty hit by Nex there. That just instantly put him down. But yeah, I was cursed with parsec problems for a little bit, despite my connection usually being solid, but that's been fixed. So, at least for the most part, it's obviously not going to be perfect, because we are playing through parsec and not like typical online play, but it's the best we can get, pretty much. It's like Venator said, we should be pretty fortunate we have what we have, to be honest, with how the game is and the fact that the developer's not able to make this game online. At least true online. Nice stab there by Captain Adler again. And it's still a fight. Captain Adler can totally make a comeback. He's slipping that thrust past the auto guard, but instantly there Nex is able to single tempo with that Y cut. Bit of a wrath cut in the German system. Very similar idea. Although Isabella does use Fiore, you can totally use her like a German fencer if you want to. I wouldn't say Nex is necessarily doing that, by the way. Just in that particular instance, it felt like a very sort of Lichtenauer way to approach the fight. I'd say overall he's probably fighting more like a Fiore practitioner, which is probably how Kubold intended for it to be, given the way Isabella handles. That stab there is actually able to win the trade this time, as there was a perfect hit. He did take a slight hit to the head, so he got a little bit lucky it wasn't a double. And Captain Adler with some blade beats out of measure, trying to sort of bait the opponent in. Doesn't quite work. Gotta be careful baiting the opponent in, and there's the upcut, and Nex takes it. Tarna certainly put up a fight. Connor, though, it seems like Nex has that matchup figured out pretty well, so he does hang on to the champion title. But good games to both of you. Really enjoyed that fight. Alright, Pico, let's get you in now, as you were fighting me, actually, for the third fight today. Landsknecht, as he knows, he joined late, so he'll be the latest fight. But if somebody who lost wants an extra fight, I can totally have you fight Landsknecht. Okay, Pico, you're on the left, actually, and I'll be on the right. I'll make sure you have keyboard and whatnot as well. Probably won't get much commentary from this fight. I prefer to usually stay relatively silent, so probably be a pretty quiet fight. You can just enjoy the duel. Oh yeah, I'll start Bar Bash. I don't want to reinvent the wheel, especially against somebody unpredictable like Pico. Anyway, good luck. Alright, GG Pico. Pico wins. Yeah, the sidestep was really good there at the end. Yeah, not my day today, unfortunately, so Pico takes it. I knew it'd be a tough fight, so that's why I put him against me. There's only so many people, but many of the old veterans can fight because it's all the same people who play, but it's been a while since I fought Pico, so I'm glad I chose Pico as my opponent. It was tough, and I lost. Yeah, I appreciate it, the calc compliment there. Yeah, yeah, I've been practicing him a bit, so hopefully that showed. I have a pretty unique style with him, I think, as well, so yeah, it's pretty good. I can take my calc against any calc, I think, and have a good chance of winning, so that's not to say other people can't beat me in the calc mirror, of course, but I'd say at this point it's as if I main him, so pretty happy with how far that calc has come. I've used him a lot in Venator's Olympics, especially. Whenever calc is in the category, it's pretty common that I'll pick him since he's in the mixed category or the broadsword category most of the time, so. Okay, Dauntless against Info now. Info will be on the right side, Dauntless on the left. Names are set. Both of you have keyboard. And I'll be right back, guys. It won't be long. If I'm still not here by the time you finish the first round, you guys know the drill. You can just keep fighting. Just make sure you switch sides. I'm going to make sure they can actually play first, though. So we're not sitting here awkwardly for a while. I don't know where Info, or what's going on with Info, but Info does have keyboard. Click the screen if it's not working. There we go. Alright, I'll be right back. Good luck to both of you.
Hey. います。Hey.
Alright, I'm back. We went to the title screen for some reason, but it's fine. I'll switch the names. We saw Yendrick against Marina, which is not a matchup we see super often, so I was watching a bit of it on my phone and it looked really interesting. I tend to favor Marina, I would say, but in that matchup, but it's by no means unwinnable for Yendrick. He has some cool gimmicks to get around the shield. Switch sides. We're not done yet. Laszlo now. Interesting. Can be a good pick against Yendrick, but we'll see if that pick works out. Though Laszlo is considered weak by many people, he's not by any means the weakest character, and his footwork allows him to close the distance really quickly, except the Dauntless to prevent that from happening.
Hey.
Yendrick himself has some pretty fast footsies too, though, so he can play the distance management game really well, and does enjoy a slight reach advantage with some of his moves.
Hey.
Nice hit there. Dauntless with an advantage now.
います。
Ooh, nice lunge there. Able to get a nice hit. Nice chop to the hand. Nice hit to the arm. Nice hit. A lot of these flags are over really quickly as neither combatant has particularly good guard, and Yendrick obviously can bypass whatever guard Lasbo does have. And there we go, a little bit of a lunge there gets parried by that single tempo by Dauntless. Alright, let's switch. Going with Jan this time against Marina, which is interesting. Perhaps the matchup was a little bit too difficult. Wants to see if a proper Saber can deal with Marina better, which, to be fair, often those sorts of characters are the counter to Marina, so I think there is some sound logic to that switch for sure. Somebody with a guard, too, can perhaps better compete against Marina's attacks, but it's down to how much experience do you have with Jan, in effect. Because if you don't have much experience, then that gimmick of the shield can still prove pretty devastating. Marina is often considered B tier. She's not considered like that high as far as the character tier list because there's a lot of matchups she struggles in and her gimmick is fairly straightforward to counter. But it is a bit of a knowledge check at the same time. If you fail that knowledge check, then Marina can seem really strong. And actually there, Marina showing one of her weaknesses there. She does not trade very well. Her damage is pretty low. Her HP is low. And Jan happens to have higher HP than most, so I'm actually not surprised, believe it or not, that that trade was in Jan's favor and not Marina's favor. If it ever gets messy, Jan basically always wins. What the hell? That was strange, but I guess we move on. That's Hellish Quart for you guys. Sometimes you get strange bugs like that. It's like he pulled his punch the last minute as it hit her face. It was really weird, but I don't think Dauntless did anything wrong there. I think it just bugged out. But nice sidestep there. It's actually a great way to counter the shield. Although Jan is not known for his sidesteps, he does have some decent ones still that can prove useful here. Nice, again, sidestep towards the shield side this time, but it went over the shield, so it still worked. Typically, it's not the side you want to sidestep towards, but a nice diagonal cut to the arm can still get past the shield if you angle it right, and the opponent's not ready. That's what we want, too, because obviously the shield has the potential to be very annoying, but in a game like this, it has to have some vulnerabilities, so even if some of them might be a little bit unrealistic to real shield combat, if they weren't there, it'd be really difficult to fight against the shield. Not impossible, as Hutton shows us. Single saber against shorter saber and small shield is totally possible, but it definitely does present some unique challenges that you have to overcome. George Silver as well. Hutton drew from George Silver's treatise, and George Silver has a whole section about like single sword against shield, I believe, sword and shield. And the trick shot to end it, that was really nice. Not an easy move to land, but it lands perfectly there. That was the perfect opportunity to try throwing it. And very nice stylish finish there for Dauntless against Infos Marina. Okay, we have Ratzig against Castar now. We're flying through this USFC, by the way. It's basically barely been an hour at this point, and we've done a bunch of fights. Yeah, I don't like how it's thrown, especially by Barbash. It looks really bizarre, but I have to say, though, landing it at all is, especially like that, is really impressive. Especially at the timing of that, too, because Info specifically opened that lane of attack, so the trick shot was just, if you want to maximize your chance of getting around that shield, that's probably the best move in that particular situation, so very nicely done to take that opportunity and immediately hit the head. I won't say it was the only move that could have landed, of course. There were a bunch of other ways probably to finish it, but the trick shot, definitely the most impressive way to do it. So it's a move I never throw unless I want to style on my opponent. So waiting for Radzig. If Castar's opponent doesn't show up, we can have Landsknecht fight early. Just because Landsknecht will be waiting for a while, and yet he's here right away. So I think it's fair to him if Radzig doesn't show up that those two fight instead. And Radzig will still get a fight if they show up later, but I think as of right now, that's how we'll do it. Unless Radzig shows up within the next, like, half a minute or so. Marina's push, not the best. Yeah, another problem with her push. It's not only that the animation is bad, that's a good point by Info. It's that the push hitbox for shields, for those who don't know, is actually bigger. So you can push a shield essentially by pushing the shield itself. You don't have to push the person to land a push. Now, is that realistic? Probably not. I would actually expect a shield user to be better at pushing. But imagine how annoying it would be if that was the case, from a gameplay perspective. So that's why it is the way it is. I think it makes a degree of sense if you consider the fact that if you don't have an offhand weapon, you can grab and you can do stuff with your offhand. So from that perspective, it makes sense that you can do stuff with the offhand that the shield user can't do. But particularly in real life, it'd be grappling, less so pushing. You can actually grapple with shields, by the way. You just can't like physically grab your opponent the way you can with obviously your offhand. Let's see if Landsknecht is around because I haven't heard anything from Radzig. But yeah, you can like hook the shield and do throws that way with it. So there's definitely ways to grapple. But obviously in a game like this, you don't want to put weirdo ragdoll stuff like that. That's for stuff like half sword. Half sword you can do stuff like that. But in a game like Hellish Court, you don't want interactions like that. Or you want to limit them as much as possible because we know what happens if you don't, and it's not pretty to look at. I'm not saying no physics, it's just you don't want like free-flowing ragdoll physics that can do random shit. And you know, the grab mechanic is better served as a very specific mechanic. Very simple. Alright, we do have Landsknecht here. So we're actually going to do Landsknecht against Castar. I'll put Radzig at the back of the queue. If they show up, they can fight then. I don't mean to rush people, of course. It just helps with the smoothness of the event if we can just move on to the next fight right away. And Landsknecht, although he was a little bit late, he let me know he wanted to play, and he's been here this whole time. So I think it's fair to him to get him to fight if somebody has not shown up. Okay, Castar he uses gamepad, Landsknecht uses keyboard. Let's get started. Landsknecht take the left, and Castar on the right side. Landsknecht probably will use Tarnowski, but we'll see. Hopefully his keyboard is working. I'm not sure what's happening. Calc possibly for Castar. Interesting. Nope. Considering Jan now. Marta in the end. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Like Marta's a character that Castar plays a lot. The other picks that he was considering would not. Do what I expect. What's going on? Lagging hard? Alright, we'll just let it pass. Nobody else was getting lagged so far, so. Could be the frame rate. It wouldn't be the frame rate because it's always been at 165 and it's never been a problem, so that's not it. Uh, 165 FPS, and that's the frame rate of my monitor, so. I've always had it at 165 and never changed it since that's the optimal setting. If you're talking about your Parsec experience, I think it's limited to 60 FPS by default as well. So like Parsec does stuff in the background so that your monitor wouldn't be overclocked by mine. Because otherwise everybody would have like different settings and it would mess everything up. So it is not the FPS. The Parsec FPS, I mean, it shouldn't be a problem. But I'll look. I've literally not changed it at all, so it shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, it's at 60 as usual. Yeah, it defaults to whatever yours is, which is yeah, it's a client side thing because I'm obviously not experiencing what you're experiencing. And again, everybody else was doing just fine with it, so it's probably not anything to do with my settings, it's probably just something else. What's up, Marks? Glad to have you in the chat. Yeah, we've had some amazing matches so far. Mine was pretty good too, even though I lost. Pretty damn happy with it. Smooth for Castar. Yeah, it's probably something on Lanchknecht's end now, which I'm sorry to hear about, of course. There's just not much I can do about that in that case. But I do believe you that you're experiencing issues. But if Castar somehow resolved it, then maybe it's resolution. Yeah, some people were having resolution issues, but that's to do with your hardware, not mine in that case. So if your hardware can't handle whatever it is I'm doing, I'm just at 1080 FPS, so if your hardware can't handle, or not FPS, 1080p, that'd be crazy FPS, but 1080p, so just standard HD. I've actually reduced it because people were having trouble with my hardware being at 2K, but yeah, if you can't handle HD, that's not something I can fix, unfortunately. Lanchknecht says he'll reconnect with VPN. Okay. Okay, VPNs usually make parsec connection worse, but obviously, if it works for Lanchknecht, then that's good. Just with caution that that's often gonna make it worse. But if it works for you, then it works. Okay, waiting for Lange to rejoin. Connecting, cool. I see you now. I'll accept you and give you a keyboard. You should be able to just take control back, but if not, we can reset it. Still lags. NA host sometimes. Yeah, Lanchknecht is from Russia, so stuff happens, unfortunately. If he wants to fight, he can, but I won't obviously force him to do that. He doesn't have to. It won't even count as a loss in that case, but it looks like he wants to fight, so we'll allow him to do that. Do appreciate that. I understand that it's rough, especially with Yendrick, when you're lagging like that, but... Nice and Cortada. Going for those high-low thrusts there of Marta. Ooh, just missed there, the charge in. That was a good try. I'm actually a little bit surprised it didn't hit. I would have to watch that back to see if it clipped through or not, the body. But that's just Hellish Quart stuff, unfortunately. This time the hand protection getting in the way, but eventually he was able to get the kill. I know there's, on the server, there's been discussions about, oh, this interaction's bugged, this character needs a buff, or this and that. I just encourage people not to overanalyze every bug that happens. Sometimes it can be an indicator that a character has a major problem that needs to be fixed. As we have discussed, there are some, especially if Gideon on animations, for example, or Tarna with the Y cut sometimes. There's undoubtedly stuff like that that happens, but I would say 9 times out of 10 when stuff like a cut not killing or not doing damage or registering properly happens, most of the time it's just the game being the game, and that's just, there's nothing you can do about it. Kubold obviously would have to go in and fix the game itself, but in that case, but the point being, basically every character gets issues like that. It's not unique to one character in that particular case. Yeah, so don't overanalyze every little thing that goes wrong. Sometimes it's just the game was janky in that moment, and there's not much that is to be done about that. It's just, it's not the character, it's the game being weird. And in that case, I think that's what that was. Anyway, we're back to the... Nice, yeah, good combination there with Lanchneck. Obviously, he's really struggling with some lag. He should be pretty happy with how he's doing so far. Trying to hook the blade there, not quite able to do so, but a good effort. A cut to the arm, though, by Castar. Castar missing the thrust, and the jabs there. Could have probably been a bit more precise in the follow-up, but Castar still did fantastic there, and got the first win. Easy for me to say, though. Castar's probably just, trying to get the kill right away. We're all guilty of that type of thing. When you're desperate to get that kill shot, sometimes you just mash the X button or the Y button, whatever it is. Yeah, so that type of thing happens, especially if Marta. I assume that was the X jab he was pushing there, trying to just get the kill as clean as possible. Calc now. One of those underrated characters. I consider Calc actually to be very good. Against Isabella, actually, which is interesting. Let's see how that goes. Lanchnecht, I guess trying to keep it simple. With the lag, going with somebody who's really solid. And an upcut to the head to start off. Nice by Castar. And yeah, Lanchnecht, you can tell he's a little passive because he's dealing with lag. But he's doing his best. I don't blame him for trying to be passive, by the way. I mean, sometimes that's all you can do when you're lagging. I do appreciate that he's trying to tough it out, but I do understand if it's frustrating, because it's never fun to be unable to time much of anything. But he is there you go. He's keeping it simple. He's actually going on the offensive now, and it's working a bit better. Surprising Castar with the Y cuts. Castar just has to lock in, I think, and figure out a way to counter that strategy. The stab is a nice try, but it's pretty easy to blade beat, so you have to be careful throwing it naked like that. But nice. This time he does a different variation. The upcut into stab to the side around Isabella's guard. That worked a little bit better, which was nice to see. Sometimes that's all you gotta do. It's not even that you stab per se, it's more that you stabbed in the wrong location. If you can get around the blade, it might be a bit better. Especially if your opponent's trying to blade beat. Nice wide cut there. And actually, Landsknecht is starting to get an advantage. Sometimes people who are lagging, they do attack at weird times. And so Castar might be struggling to cope with that. He's just sort of throwing Y cuts. And they are pretty fast, to be fair. And it actually does work. So credit to Landsknecht. He's found something that's pretty simple. Doesn't have to put as much thought into it. And I think Castar was maybe panicking a little bit as it started to... The match started to be pulled out from under him a little bit. It is 1-1. More switching of characters. Nice there. So Landsknecht tried to go for the double lunge, but Castar got blade contact first and then immediately sidestepped and hit the head. And that's the textbook way to counter Marie's thrust. So if people are struggling with that, that's how you do it. It's actually not that difficult if you know how to do it. And yeah, Castar actually kept it really simple there. He just sort of threw a bunch of cuts in her face and one eventually landed. But sometimes that's what you do against Marie. You close the rapier down. Suddenly her options are very limited. And of course we have to once more remember that Landsknecht is dealing with lag, hence the weird dash in there. I think he thought he was closer than he actually was. Probably was trying to predict in advance, so you gotta keep that in mind as well. But it does mean there's a lot of room for error with this long weapon. It's very easy to misjudge the distance and then out of nowhere you're being hit a bunch of times. Again, the grab out of measure, I assume he thought once more that he would be closer than he actually was. And unfortunately, Castar was able to go for a leg cut, actually, and then follow it up. We don't see that leg cut very often, but it worked really well here. Castar have a very good Samuel, and I'd say Samuel is a pretty good counter into Marie in general. That sidestep is a great way to get offline and to beat the blade really quickly, and then quickly follow it up with a nice hit to the head. And the sidestep, but this time he gets hit. He was not able to cover himself while he did so, so the stab was easily able to hit him there. And there you go, a hit to the hand on the retreat. And one more is needed for Castar to make it 2-1. Nice feint there by Landsknecht, trying to be a little bit more complicated despite the lag. Not sure it's quite working here, but I applaud him for trying. Keeps going in with some stabs. They both trade. But there we go, a feint a nice way to counter somebody who's lagging because it bypasses the guard by design. You're supposed to move away from it or call it out, but if you can't react in time, it's very difficult to deal with. Especially if Marie's guard, it has to be said, Marie's guard is not good at all. It's not designed to be good. She's supposed to be a zoner. There's less mass in the blade, so it's particularly easy in that case to bypass and or even just beat it down and hit her. Okay, Jan against Samuel now. Matchup that can go either way. Why? That's a classic there. Results in a double though. Lanchnet trying to force it a bit too much there. Again, probably lagging, so he's just going for whatever he thinks will work in the moment. Nice stab as Castar whiffs there. Castar for combination. Gotta watch the stamina after taking a hit. He clashed swords a little bit. And the feint there is immediately called out. Lanchnet might not have even noticed there was a feint, to be honest, so he just went for an attack. But that is, ironically, the best way to deal with a feint. So, there you go, why? Castar tried attacking into it, but it was not successful. And that's a double. Nice stab. The dashing thrust is actually very difficult to sidestep. A lot of Yanni's thrusts are, so often you don't want to do so. Unless you're able to beat it down or somehow disrupt it with your blade. Sidestepping is very risky. Yeah, so I think Castar is starting to figure out what Landsknecht is trying to do. And so it might be very difficult for him to adjust with the lag. Castar just keeping it tight, going for clean punishes. There's a good example there. He actually did sidestep the corkscrew, but that's because he blade beat it as he moved. If he had not done that, it's quite possible it would have been a clear hit for the corkscrew, because you can't sidestep it, for the most part. The cork allows the curve to track you of the blade, so moving laterally is actually the worst thing you can do a lot of the time. Even though it typically is a good idea against stabs, against that particular stab and a lot of Yanni's other stabs, it's not so good. And nice A-cut there. We've seen that move get used a lot more lately, which I'm happy to see. It's actually one of my favorite cuts that Samuel has, visually speaking, but for a while it's been weak. So I'm glad to see that cutting angle, which is a classic sort of counter cut angle in a lot of saber systems, is being used effectively. A-cuts often have a bad reputation in this game. There are some characters that have good A-cuts, but a lot of them generally don't. It's one of those buttons you don't press very often. Just a bit of a shame, because in Saber in particular, it's a very good angle to try cutting from. And Castar with a dash up close, which opened his guard up, and Lanchnet took that opportunity. He's definitely making it a fight, despite the circumstances. Goes with a dash thrust, immediately countered. The thrust lands for Castar, but not quite able to kill, but an excellent sidestep does finish it. GG's, good try from Lanchknecht. Apologies about the lag, there's not really much that I don't think that we can do about it, but Castar does win. And now we have Platypi against Oak to finish the event off, unless Radzig shows up. I don't see Platypi online, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. I often appear offline as well, just so people aren't messaging me as though expecting I'm online or something like that when I'm not. It's often my default. There he is. Yeah, so I totally get that as well. Okay, this will be the last fight, most likely, but we'll see. Platypi on the left, Oak on the right. This will be a banger here. Both of these players are pros. Oak obviously having a bit more experience, having been with us for longer, but I consider Platypi a veteran all the same. And either one could totally win this one. It'll be quite a derby, I would say. Tarna there. Love to see it against Yazuk. A pretty equal matchup, just with advantages and disadvantages on both sides, is how I would put it. It can be tough for either one for different reasons. I like that approaching cut that Oak did there, a little flourish before doing the cut. Almost a feint of sorts, but not quite. And that A cut to the hand, nicely done. Oak with a combination, but I'd love to see that from Platypi. He dashed into the punch, and then immediately followed that up. That was very cinematic. Again, a punch. Reminds me of Black Sailors. If you guys have watched that first duel, it's one of my favorite fights in film, where they fight with cutlasses. There is actually a lot of punching and kicking and stuff like that. And it's done in a very organic way, not in an unrealistic way. It's in a way where, you know, that could actually happen in a sword fight. If you've ever read sword fighting accounts, stuff like that does happen sometimes. It might not be ideal, because usually a lot of fencers want you to keep a certain distance away. But sometimes grappling, punching, and elbowing does happen in sword fights as well. And I just like that he's sort of throwing those punches in between the actual cuts. Goes low, and a punch again. A lot of punches by Platypi. He's actually been starting to make a name for himself for that stuff. But he's also causing chaos with the moves that he's using. In this case, Oak is able to weather the storm and land his first flag, which is pretty wild. I expected this to be more even, but so far Platypi has been just dominating the pace of the fight. Oak is starting to get some flags, though. It might not be as clear as it might seem, as Oak is known for these comebacks out of nowhere. You can steal a round out of nowhere when you least expect it. There's another one as Oak is starting to gain initiative back, put his foot on the gas pedal, which is what he needs to do here, I think, to get some advantage back. Ideally at a time when, of course, Tarna's not about to hit him, but that can be easier said than done. Bit of a trade there, but Oak did take out Platypi's mobility, so he might be able to set up a flag, but he does not end up setting up a flag for himself. It's a double, as he went for the upcut, but exposed his head in doing so. And there we go, an interruption by Oak. If he was a bit more precise, he might have been able to finish it and get another flag, but he was not quite able to do so. This one definitely feels like a title fight, even though it's not a title fight in its own right, so... Platypi going in, but he's a little hasty to finish this. Oak is known for his comebacks, so you gotta be careful against a guy like Oak. He hit the leg, then hit the wrist, and now it's not looking so impossible for Oak to win this whole round. So we'll see what happens with that. A bunch of snap cuts by Oak. Wrist cuts aimed at the hand, but not quite landing. Trying to interrupt his opponent preemptively, but Platypi does the same thing actually with those retreat cuts, and Platypi eventually takes it. He's probably breathing a sigh of relief there as Oak was getting some momentum back, and it's looking like it'll be a close fight despite the start that Platypi had there. This is very cinematic so far, which I like to see. We're going to end this with a banger, which is what I was hoping to do. That's why I put these guys last. Because you always got to end with like something of a final, even if the title fight is earlier, I think so. And that's not to say the other fights were bad. They were great fights as well. I always try to ensure the matchups are balanced, so we always see really good quality fights from these events, but I think a lot of people were hoping to see Oak throw some hands today, so they're really happy to see Oak fighting somebody who's a worthy opponent. And one who's beating him, it has to be said. Not only is he worthy, but he's actually getting the upper hand so far. Platypi doing a great job with Tarna. Tarna with another great showing, completely busting the myth, I think, that he's weak. Even a fast character like Yazuk has trouble getting in when Tarna is played expertly. But there we go, Oak is able to capitalize on that dash in. It was a little bit unsound there, I would say. I get what Platypi is going for. He's probably trying to set up a sidestep, but he was too close. And Oak is the type of guy where if you make a small mistake like that, you will be immediately punished. So you do have to be careful, but Platypi strikes a good balance most of the time of taking risks when he needs to, but not making mistakes as such. Just sort of taking the initiative with some offbeat attacks. But Oak does get a nice hit. Not quite a kill yet, though. That's going to be the trouble, is he cannot really trade with Tarna super well. In a game like this, of course, any hit is good, and any hit can result in a kill. But it has to be said that Tarna's blade is heavier, and it hits a lot harder with these sort of shoulder cuts. And one thing I actually have noticed is that Yazuk lately has had a little bit of trouble against Tarna, despite the popular opinion that Tarna does not do very well against these fast characters. I would actually beg to differ. If Tarna is used properly, I think he can also pose a problem for these characters. It sort of goes both ways. And for Oak right now, I'm sure it does not feel like an easy matchup at all. It feels like quite the opposite, because any sort of small mistake on his part is also being punished. And so, if they are both making small mistakes or opening themselves up to certain tactics, and they're both trading blows, that's where Tarna is going to start to really showcase his advantages. And I think that's what we're seeing here. Platypi causing just enough chaos to throw Oak off his game. Bit of a character switch here. Love to see a Gideon. We don't see a Gideon often. Platypi can rest assured that we are not playing on more animations, so Gideon does have a guard. Obviously, it's not the strongest guard in the game by any stretch, but it is a guard all the same. It is functional. So, we should see a good fight from him. He also uses Gideon very well, so yeah, on more animations, it'd be pretty dreadful. Yazuk could just immediately stun lock him, and he wouldn't be able to do anything. Besides, I guess, cut him first. Like, try to sort of catch him out. You could try that with Gideon, even without a guard. But it would be very dreadful if Platypi had to do that. So, glad to see Gideon in top form here in these settings. And cutting the thrust there, Oak dominating the center and immediately getting a perfect stab to the body. Kind of surprised to see the character switch, but I do appreciate seeing Gideon all the same. Platypi, with a similar game plan, you can play Gideon pretty similarly to how you played Tarna. They both have the leg switching gimmick, and they both have passing footwork with powerful slashes. Nicely done with the sidestep. So a lot of the principle here actually apply both ways, and you can tell that the sort of Polish cross-cutting style was inspired by Dusak a little bit when modern martial artists were trying to reconstruct it, so there is some similarities there. And that is completely intentional. Whether it's strictly accurate to how some Polish fencers were actually fencing is obviously debatable. There's not enough proof to really say whether it was how they fenced or wasn't how they fenced. I think the best we can say is it's pretty plausible, I think, that some of them were fighting that way. But then you'd have others who are probably fighting more like Jan or fighting more like Barabash or Samuel. So I like that Kubel has sort of captured a spectrum of saber fighters. So it's sort of up to you to decide what's the optimal way. Different types of sword too can change the way you fight as well. So if your saber is less forward heavy and you have more hand protection, then you're obviously going to fight more like Samuel. Whereas if your saber is forward heavy like Laszlo's, you're going to fight more like him or Gideon. Used to play this on my grandfather's PC. I had to put everything on low to run it. Yeah, welcome Brandon Boyce, all the same. Hopefully you have a better setup now, as this game can be pretty punishing if your PC is struggling to run it. The FPS can result in some annoying slow-mo. I do not envy you if you were dealing with that before you found some good settings. Platypi going for the cut to the wrist there. Not quite able to get it. They both move back and forth. Very good footsies by both of them. And it's looking like Oak will get his first win potentially, but Platypi is looking to make a comeback of his own. And if he does, that will actually be the match. He's playing really tight now, not wanting to give away this flag. There's no reason to at this point when he can just win. But unfortunately, he does end up doing that, as he was caught a little bit offline there by Oak. With those wrist cuts. Really nicely done. But it's obviously not over yet. Platypi maintains an advantage. Yeah, exactly. The FPS are directly related to the physics, so it's, yeah. If your hardware for some reason is not running it well, then, yeah. You're gonna have some issues. Tarna obviously went better than Gideon, so I'm not surprised to see the switch. Oak might be able to ride this momentum and get another win, though. We will see. Because there's still a bit of psychology at play. If you switch characters and then you lost a match that you didn't necessarily have to lose, it might have a negative, even if small, psychological impact long term. Although I'm sure Platypi is just having fun too. I don't think he's that concerned about it, but if he's, really determined to win, it can have an impact. And Oak is the type of guy who will ride that momentum to victory. He will be absolutely ruthless with any advantage that he's given. And so far, he is ahead in flags, but Platypi gets a flag back. Bunch of cuts there. And nicely done there by Platypi. And he makes it a fight now. It's not clear who's going to win anymore. As Oak gets a nice hit. And it's a double. They both go for cuts there, but Yazur's guard holds there. And Platypi does take a hit, but that doesn't much matter. If he can get a more decisive blow in, then he can still take the flag, as we see there. And there they trade. That is something Oak really wants to avoid. That is the tough part of this matchup, is trading with Tarna. At best will result in a double a lot of the time. Maybe you can win if you're precise with your cuts, but a lot of the time, what will end up happening is you will actually lose the trade if you're imprecise. Oak, even as a precise player, he can make mistakes as well. Given the nature of the game, it can get very chaotic and out of his control too. So in those sorts of situations, Tarna will prevail most of the time. And Oak is trying to avoid them, but Platypi is still doing a great job of creating opportunities himself. Even when Oak is trying to avoid doing just that. And there we go, that's an example of what I was talking about with that punch. That is really tough for Oak to deal with, actually. I'm sure there is an answer Oak can find, but it's not so simple in the chaos of a fight to find, especially on the last handful of flags there. Nice punch by Platypi, and then immediately finishes it. And a great win against a Saber Master in Oak. And I think we're going to have to end it there. I don't think Radzig said anything, so unless Radzig yells at me right now, we're probably just gonna end the stream. But thank you for everybody who participated. Great games as usual, some high quality fights. Even my fight against Pico, I did lose. Obviously, it wasn't quite my day, but I really enjoyed the fight. There were a lot of cool exchanges and cool interactions. So glad to see Tarna also doing so well, Samuel doing well, even Yazik. Although Tarna, I would say he really turned up the heat today. He seemed like one of the top characters. So really happy to see that. And yeah, thank you everybody for competing, and I'll see you next time.